Eleanor Whitfield had never spoken a word. At 10 years old, her world was one of silence and stillness, a universe defined not by voices but by shapes, colors, and the subtle rhythm of routine. The Whitfield estate, a sprawling modern mansion perched on the edge of a quiet hill, shimmered with wealth, yet the spaces within it carried a palpable emptiness. The polished marble floors reflected sunlight in harsh angles, the corridors stretched like endless tunnels, and the silence was a constant companion. Charles Whitfield, her father, a 35-year-old billionaire entrepreneur, moved through the house like a force of nature, efficient, precise, and unyielding. He had tried everything: therapists, specialists, speech coaches, even experimental therapies that promised miracles. Yet Eleanor remained silent. Her world was small, yet meticulously ordered. Toys were arranged by size, books stacked with exacting precision, and every transition, from breakfast to school to bedtime, was a carefully choreographed ritual. Eleanor moved through these routines with a quiet composure, her dark eyes observing, cataloging, but never speaking. Her mother had long ago stepped back, overwhelmed by the distance that money and pressure had created, leaving Charles as both provider and enforcer, the keeper of rules, expectations, and unspoken discipline. Staff rotated in and out, each trying in their own way to coax the girl into sound, to break the silence, but the warmth that might have reached her had been replaced by schedules, checklists, and measured encouragement. Eleanor's older brother, Thomas, 8, was a lively presence in the house, full of questions and bursts of energy. He often tried to draw her into games, to share in the simple pleasures of childhood, but Eleanor's response was usually a quiet smile or a faint glance. Even the most exuberant moments, the family holidays, birthday parties, or weekend outings, were colored by Eleanor's distance, her voice never joining the chorus of laughter or chatter. Charles often found himself watching her from afar, his mind a constant swirl of strategies, wondering what he could do differently, wondering if the silence was a reflection of his own failings. On a golden morning in late spring, sunlight streamed through the large windows of the playroom, dust motes dancing in the beams like tiny sparks of magic. Eleanor sat cross-legged on the floor, a wooden puzzle spread before her, her fingers moving deliberately, carefully, fitting pieces together with a focus that bordered on ritual. The walls around her were lined with shelves of toys, books, and art supplies, but the room felt almost cathedral-like in its stillness. Charles entered, his polished shoes clicking on the hardwood floor, papers clutched under one arm, his gaze scanning the room for any hint of progress, any sign that Eleanor might finally speak. He stopped, his brow furrowing, and watched as Eleanor lifted a puzzle piece, turned it in her small hands, and placed it perfectly in its spot. She looked up at him briefly, her eyes dark and unreadable, then returned to her task. The air between them was taut with expectation, the silence heavy, yet somehow protective. Charles sighed, shifting his weight from one foot to the other. Even surrounded by all his success, the companies, the properties, the public acclaim, he felt an ache, a persistent sense of inadequacy that no amount of money could erase. He wanted to reach her, to find the key, to hear her voice not as a whisper or a murmur, but as the living proof of her presence, her individuality. But each attempt seemed only to heighten the barriers, making the silence more profound. The house itself seemed complicit in maintaining this quiet. Even the clocks ticked softly, almost apologetically. Sunlight danced across the polished surfaces, creating patterns that Eleanor traced with her gaze, absorbing the world in fragments rather than sound. Every moment was precise, every interaction measured. Charles, despite his outward confidence and influence, was a man wrestling with helplessness in the face of something that defied control. He did not yet know that the breakthrough would not come from specialists, or therapy, or wealth. It would come from patience, warmth, and a presence that demanded nothing but attention and care, a presence that would teach Eleanor to find her own voice, not through pressure, but through love. In the quiet of that late morning, Eleanor shifted slightly, her fingers brushing over the puzzle pieces. She paused, closed her eyes briefly, and for a moment, the air seemed to hold its breath. Charles moved closer, instinctively leaning over the puzzle table, expecting some small sound, some sign of life beyond the meticulous motions, but there was only the soft brush of her fingers, the light tapping of puzzle pieces settling into place. The room remained hushed, but within that stillness, An unseen current of potential hummed, waiting, as if the house itself knew that a sound was coming, one that would alter the rhythm of their lives forever. A week after the routine puzzle observation, a new presence entered the Whitfield household. Monique Harris, a 25-year-old black woman with an easy warmth that seemed to radiate even before she spoke. She carried herself with quiet confidence, a patient smile lingering on her lips, and a stillness in her movement that felt deliberate, like every gesture had meaning. Unlike the other staff members who arrived with checklists and schedules, Monique seemed unhurried, as though the world could wait while she listened. Charles had hired her after another round of failed attempts by specialists to coax Eleanor out of her silence. He did not know then that the key to his daughter's voice was not expertise, but empathy, presence, and the unassuming power of someone who did not demand, who did not push, but simply existed alongside her. Monique's first morning in the house was gentle. She wore a soft blouse and practical trousers, her hair pulled back in a neat bun. She knelt at Eleanor's level in the playroom, her hands resting lightly on the carpet as she observed the girl working on her puzzles. She hummed softly, a low melody that seemed to ripple through the room without forcing attention, like a whisper of wind through the trees. Eleanor looked up briefly, her dark eyes taking in this new figure, and then returned to the puzzle. Monique did not speak, did not urge, did not comment. She simply hummed and moved quietly, tidying scattered toys, placing books carefully back on shelves, her movements choreographed with both care and rhythm. Over the next few days, Eleanor's world subtly shifted. The rigid boundaries of routine remained, but Monique became a quiet companion in the spaces between. She read aloud in a voice that was melodic, not commanding. She sang lullabies at bedtime, her hands moving with the music, her presence steady and calm. Eleanor watched closely, her gaze flicking from Monique's lips to her hands, absorbing the motions, the cadence, the gentle warmth of sound. She did not imitate, did not respond verbally, but something within her began to stir. The silence was no longer a wall, but a space filled with possibility. Charles noticed the difference immediately. Whereas other staff had tried to pull Eleanor forward with structured interventions, Monique allowed the child to lead, to explore, and to observe. During meals, she would sit nearby, quietly offering a reassuring smile or a soft hum, never intruding, never admonishing. She spoke to Thomas with ease and humor, her patience extending naturally to both children, yet Eleanor seemed especially attuned to her presence. There was a rhythm to the way Monique moved through the day, a silent music that Eleanor seemed to recognize, a pulse of reassurance beneath the strict lines of the Whitfield household. One afternoon, Charles entered the living room, expecting the usual quiet tension. He paused as he observed Monique sitting cross-legged on the carpet with Eleanor in front of her, a small music box spinning slowly beside them. Monique hummed a gentle tune, her eyes soft, her voice blending with the hum of the spinning mechanism. Eleanor's fingers twitched in time with the melody, her lips moving slightly, almost imperceptibly. Charles blinked, unsure of what he had seen, then looked again. The movement was subtle, almost secretive, but it was there. Eleanor was engaging, responding to sound in a way she had never done before, her body swaying lightly to the rhythm, her small head tilting with intent focus. Monique's teaching was never forced. She did not demand repetition, she did not correct, she simply allowed the music to exist, letting Eleanor's attention find her own path. Sometimes she would leave the room briefly, letting the girl absorb silence and sound together, trusting that the connection would form naturally. Charles, observing from the doorway, began to understand that this was different. Monique's presence was not a tool or a technique, it was a bridge. In a house defined by wealth, by control, and by unrelenting schedules, she was a living, breathing space of safety, warmth, and possibility. By the end of the week, small signs appeared. Eleanor hummed along softly while Monique tidied the playroom. She traced the melodies with her lips, sometimes matching the rhythm with her fingers tapping the floor. Charles watched from a distance, heart tightening with an unfamiliar sensation, hope. He realized for the first time that perhaps the path to Eleanor's voice would not be through interventions, specialists, or money, but through patience, through genuine connection, through the steady warmth of someone who understood that silence was not absence but presence waiting to bloom. And in that still, sunlit playroom, the first seeds of Eleanor's voice had begun to take root. It was a late afternoon, the sun dipping low over the Whitfield estate, spilling golden light through the wide windows of Eleanor's playroom. Shadows stretched across the polished floor, creating long, warm patterns that danced over the scattered toys and shelves lined with carefully curated books. The house, usually so orderly and quiet, seemed even more still than usual, as though holding its breath in anticipation. Charles Whitfield, exhausted from a day of board meetings and endless phone calls, wandered past the playroom, intending only a brief glance at Eleanor before retreating to his study. But something, an unfamiliar note, soft and trembling, halted him in his tracks. The sound was faint at first, almost imperceptible, but unmistakably melodic. Charles's brow furrowed as he leaned slightly against the doorway, his sharp eyes scanning the room. There, in the soft pool of light near the music corner, Eleanor Whitfield, 10 years old, sat cross-legged on the carpet, her hands resting on her lap. Kneeling beside her was Monique Harris, her voice gentle, her lips moving as she guided a song without pressure or expectation. But then Charles realized, the song was not Monique's alone. Eleanor was singing. The sound was tentative, fragile, yet profoundly clear. It was a spiritual, an old melody Monique had been teaching her, resonating with a sweetness that seemed almost impossible in a child who had never spoken. Eleanor's lips moved, forming words she had never uttered aloud, and the room, with its polished floors and sunlit corners, became a sacred space where the impossible had taken shape. Charles felt as if he had stumbled into a hidden world, one that existed in the quiet folds of time and patience. His chest tightened, and for a moment he could not move, could not breathe. Eleanor's eyes were downcast, focused on her hands as they rested lightly on her knees, yet her voice carried steadily, swelling in confidence with each phrase. Monique's presence beside her was calm and unwavering. She hummed along quietly, allowing Eleanor's voice to take center stage, never correcting, never intruding. Charles watched, riveted, feeling a mix of awe, disbelief, and a surge of emotion he could not name. This was his daughter, the silent girl who had never spoken. Yet here she was, articulating melody and words with a natural grace that no therapy or specialist had ever coaxed from her. The moment was fragile, intimate, and unrepeatable. Eleanor's world, once bounded by routines, schedules, and invisible walls of silence, had opened just enough to allow this song to emerge. Charles felt the weight of all the years, the anxiety, the money spent on specialists, the countless hours of trying to control what could not be controlled, collapse into a single instant of pure, unfiltered reality. His throat tightened, his eyes blurred, but he could not look away. He felt as if he were witnessing not just a song but the birth of something deeper, something that spoke of trust, of patience, of unseen connections that defied logic and wealth alike. Monique, sensing his presence, did not startle or falter. She continued humming, her eyes warm, her hands steady, guiding Eleanor with the gentlest of touches. Eleanor, unaware that she was being watched, sang with more confidence, her small voice filling the room with a richness that seemed to radiate beyond the walls. Every note carried a story of waiting, of feeling safe, of being truly seen. For the first time, Charles understood that this voice had always existed, but only now had Eleanor chosen to release it. When the final note lingered in the air and faded, Eleanor exhaled softly, her eyes lifting to meet Monique's in a quiet, shared acknowledgement. Charles remained frozen at the doorway, his mind spinning with disbelief and wonder. He wanted to step forward, to speak, to ask questions, but he feared that any movement might shatter this delicate moment. Slowly he backed away, retreating into the hallway, giving Eleanor and Monique the space they had created together, a space defined by trust, patience, and unconditional presence. As he leaned against the wall, heart racing, Charles realized the profound truth that had eluded him for so long. Love, in its quietest form, could achieve what money, pressure, and expertise never could. Monique had not demanded. She had not forced. She had allowed Eleanor to discover her own voice, and in doing so, had opened a door that Charles had spent years trying to break down with force and structure. The silence that had defined his daughter's world was no longer an obstacle. It was a bridge, now crossed, leading toward connection, understanding, and the possibility of a shared future that neither of them could have imagined before that golden afternoon. The room remained bathed in the warm light of the setting sun, dust motes floating lazily in the glow, as Eleanor, still unaware of her father's presence, finished her song with a gentle exhale. Charles whispered a silent vow to himself. He would never underestimate patience again, and he would learn, somehow, to meet his daughter in the spaces she created, to honor the voice that had emerged from love, not obligation. And in that quiet, golden moment, the Whitfield household seemed to breathe for the first time in years, as if the very walls recognized that something extraordinary had begun. The days that followed Eleanor's first sung words were filled with a quiet electricity, an undercurrent of wonder and disbelief that seemed to hum through every corner of the Whitfield estate. Charles found himself walking more slowly down the corridors, listening intently for the faintest sound of Eleanor's voice, afraid to disturb the fragile rhythm Monique had created. He realized, with a mix of humility and awe, that the breakthrough had not come from wealth, therapy, or pressure. It had come from trust, patience, and the soft insistence of someone who simply believed in the child. Monique moved through the house as she always had, steady and calm, humming low melodies while tidying rooms, folding clothes, or preparing snacks. She never called attention to Eleanor's singing. She allowed it to emerge naturally, like sunlight through leaves, gentle and inevitable. One afternoon, Charles finally found the courage to ask her about it. They stood in the sunlit kitchen, Monique leaning casually against the counter, her dark eyes calm and unwavering, and Charles, for once, felt like an outsider peering into a secret world he had yet to understand. "How long has she been singing?" he asked, his voice low, almost a whisper. Monique smiled softly, a mixture of pride and quiet amusement in her gaze. She explained that Eleanor had begun humming first, mimicking the melodies she heard in Monique's songs, a gentle exploration of sound that was entirely her own. There had been no forcing, no schedules, no pressure. She had let Eleanor decide when and how to use her voice, offering only warmth, presence, and consistency. It was, Monique said, about creating a safe space where Eleanor could feel seen, not instructed, heard, not corrected. Charles listened, a weight lifting from his chest as he absorbed her words. For years, he had measured progress in charts, sessions, and appointments, believing that control and intervention would yield results. Yet here, in the soft cadence of Monique's explanation, he recognized a profound truth. The silence had never been a problem to fix. It was a language of its own, a reflection of Eleanor's need for safety, patience, and understanding. The revelation struck him with a force he had not expected. He felt both shame for past mistakes and gratitude for the unexpected teacher who had guided his daughter toward her voice. That evening, Charles lingered outside Eleanor's playroom, listening to the faint strains of music drifting through the doorway. She sang with a growing confidence now, her voice clear, resonant, yet tender, shaped by moments of pure safety and trust. He realized that every note, every hesitation and pause, was a message, a reflection of her inner world, her courage, and her unfolding identity. For the first time, Charles understood that communication was more than words. It was connection, attention, and the unspoken language of care. The realization transformed him. He began to spend small, deliberate moments with Eleanor each day, sitting quietly beside her while she worked on puzzles or painted, humming softly to join the rhythm she had begun to internalize. He learned to mirror her movements, to respect her boundaries, to recognize that the silence he had once viewed as a problem was, in truth, a doorway to deeper understanding. Slowly, Eleanor responded, not immediately with speech, but with glances, gestures, and eventually, a willingness to sing in his presence. Each note she offered was a small triumph, a shared secret of trust that deepened their bond. Monique continued her steady guidance, her presence a constant but unobtrusive force. She encouraged songs, but she also nurtured quiet, reflective moments, allowing Eleanor to explore sound at her own pace. Charles watched with growing admiration and gratitude, realizing that Monique had achieved what decades of intervention could not. She had nurtured Eleanor's voice without demanding it, teaching her that the world could be safe, gentle, and responsive. One evening, as the sun set and painted the sky in hues of amber and rose, Charles stood in the doorway of the playroom once more. Eleanor, now humming a familiar melody, glanced up at him, a small, radiant smile spreading across her face. In that smile, Charles saw the culmination of patience, love, and respect. the power of connection over control. He understood that this was not just a breakthrough for Eleanor, it was a breakthrough for him as well. He had learned that true communication required listening, presence, and the courage to step back, to let love lead where power and money could not. In that golden moment, Charles felt a profound shift within himself. The house, once a space defined by order and silence, began to feel alive with possibility. Eleanor's voice, fragile yet persistent, had become a symbol of what could emerge when one chooses patience over pressure, empathy over authority, and love over control. For the first time, Charles felt that he was not just a father trying to fix a problem, he was a parent privileged enough to witness a child discovering herself, guided by someone whose patience had opened a door that no amount of wealth could unlock. And so, in the quiet warmth of the Whitfield estate, a new rhythm began to pulse, a rhythm of trust, shared presence, and the transformative power of gentle guidance. Weeks turned into months, and the Whitfield household began to hum with a subtle but profound change. The silence that had once dominated every corner of the estate was no longer an absence. It was a space filled with the soft murmur of growth, discovery, and connection. Charles Whitfield, once consumed by schedules, appointments, and attempts to control outcomes, found himself present in ways he had never imagined. He learned to sit with Eleanor, to mirror her rhythm, to respect the delicate boundaries of her world while slowly inviting her into his. Monique Harris continued her quiet guidance, her presence now seamlessly woven into the fabric of the household. She encouraged songs, introduced simple hand movements to accompany melodies, and allowed Eleanor to explore expression at her own pace. Charles observed with a mixture of awe and humility, realizing that what he had mistaken for passivity or silence was, in fact, a profound attentiveness, a listening that revealed Eleanor's inner world in ways words never could. He began joining her in simple songs, humming alongside her, allowing himself to falter, to laugh at his own mistakes, and to delight in her emerging confidence. Eleanor, for her part, began to bridge the gap between music and speech. Her voice, once reserved for private hums and gentle melodies, started to accompany small words, phrases, and exclamations. The milestones were subtle. A whispered hello in the morning, a giggle as Charles made a playful mistake in a song, the quiet naming of colors or objects as she painted. Each moment felt monumental, a testament to the transformative power of patience and presence. Charles found himself cherishing these small victories, understanding for the first time that communication was not about perfect sentences or flawless articulation. It was about connection, trust, and shared experience. The household, once meticulously ordered and regimented, took on a new rhythm. Music and movement wove through daily life, soft melodies punctuating breakfast, afternoon play, and bedtime routines. Thomas, Eleanor's younger brother, became a participant rather than a spectator, learning to harmonize with his sister, his laughter now mingling with her emerging voice. Charles marveled at how the family, once fragmented by routines and expectations, had begun to cohere through shared sound and gentle interaction. One crisp morning, Charles stood in the playroom doorway, observing Eleanor and Monique as they worked through a simple new melody. Eleanor's fingers traced the pattern of the song in the air, her lips forming the words with clarity and confidence. Charles felt a surge of emotion, pride, love, and an almost overwhelming gratitude for Monique's unwavering patience. He stepped forward, kneeling beside his daughter, allowing her to continue while he hummed softly in accompaniment. Eleanor glanced up, a spark of recognition lighting her eyes, and she offered a tentative smile, as if acknowledging that her father had finally found the key to her world. The transformation extended beyond music. Charles began to communicate with Eleanor through gentle prompts, shared activities, and most importantly, listening. He discovered that patience was not passive, it required attention, presence, and the willingness to step aside while allowing a child to lead. Eleanor's world expanded, not because it was forced open, but because it had been nurtured with care, trust, and empathy. By late afternoon, the Whitfield family gathered in the sunlit living room. Eleanor led a simple song, her voice clear and expressive, while Charles hummed alongside her, occasionally offering soft encouragement. Thomas clapped in rhythm, adding his small voice to the harmony. Monique watched from a corner, her expression a mix of pride and quiet satisfaction. She had guided Eleanor to her voice, But the real magic had emerged from Eleanor's own willingness to be seen, to trust, and to step into her own expression. Charles reflected on the months that had passed, the mistakes, the missed opportunities, the endless attempts to control outcomes. He understood now that transformation was not about wealth, status, or authority. It was about presence, empathy, and the courage to trust the child before him. Eleanor's journey had reshaped him as a father, teaching him that love, patience, and connection could achieve what expertise and resources could not. As the sun dipped low outside, casting a golden glow over the family, Eleanor sang with a confidence that seemed to fill every corner of the room. Charles's heart swelled, and he realized that the silence that had once defined their lives was now replaced by something infinitely more powerful: shared voice, mutual understanding, and the tender, unbreakable bond of a family transformed. Months had passed since that golden afternoon when Eleanor first sang, and the Whitfield household had become a place of warmth, laughter, and shared presence. The rigid routines that had once defined their lives had softened, replaced by moments of genuine connection, gentle guidance, and music that threaded through every corner of the home. Eleanor's voice had grown stronger, more confident, and her world had expanded beyond the carefully constructed boundaries of silence into a universe alive with sound, expression, and joy. Charles Whitfield, once consumed by his relentless drive for control and success, had become a parent transformed. He spent long hours with Eleanor, participating in her musical explorations, humming along with melodies, and celebrating each new word she dared to utter. Each note she sang, each phrase she whispered, was a testament to patience, empathy, and the profound power of love. He realized that wealth could not buy what Monique Harris had brought to their lives, the understanding that trust and gentle guidance could unlock a child's true potential. Monique remained a quiet, steady presence, guiding Eleanor with an unobtrusive hand. She encouraged creativity, nurtured exploration, and allowed Eleanor's individuality to shine. The songs they practiced together became a bridge, connecting father, daughter, and brother in ways that transcended words. Thomas, now fully engaged, added his laughter and small harmonies to the melodies, completing the family's emerging rhythm. Together, they created a shared language of music and trust, a world where Eleanor's voice was no longer hidden but celebrated. One spring morning, Charles arranged a small recital for family and close friends. The playroom, once a sanctuary of silence, was transformed into a stage, bathed in soft golden light filtering through the tall windows. Eleanor, dressed in a light pink dress, stood at the center, her hands gently clasping a small music stand. Monique, standing slightly behind her, offered quiet reassurance, while Thomas flitted about with excitement, clapping in rhythm and whispering encouragement. Charles remained near the edge of the room, heart pounding with anticipation and pride. When the music began, Eleanor sang with a confidence that filled the room. Her voice, once a fragile whisper, now carried clarity, emotion, and resonance. She navigated the melodies with grace, occasionally glancing at her father, their eyes meeting in a silent exchange of love and shared triumph. The audience, moved by the beauty and authenticity of her performance, listened in awe, many with tears quietly tracing their cheeks. Each note Eleanor offered was a testament to the transformative power of patience, empathy, and unconditional presence. As the final notes lingered in the warm air and faded into silence, Eleanor's small chest rose and fell with a quiet triumph. Charles stepped forward, kneeling beside her, his eyes glistening, and offered a gentle, proud smile. In that moment, words were unnecessary. Their connection, forged through months of patience and love, spoke louder than anything else. Monique watched from the side, her heart full, knowing that her quiet guidance had changed the trajectory of a young life, allowing Eleanor to find her voice on her own terms. The recital ended with applause, soft and reverent, but the true celebration was private and enduring. Eleanor had not only sung, she had transcended the silence that had defined her early years, building bridges of connection, trust, and love that no wealth or therapy could have achieved alone. Charles reflected on his journey, recognizing the lessons learned, the importance of patience, the value of listening, and the transformative power of presence. He had come to understand that true parenting required humility, empathy, and the courage to follow rather than lead when the child's voice needed space to emerge. In the months that followed, music continued to fill the Whitfield home, Eleanor sang during meals, play, and quiet evenings. Thomas added his cheerful voice. Charles hummed along, learning, laughing, and celebrating the small victories that had once seemed impossible. The house, once a fortress of silence and control, had become a living testament to transformation, patience, and the enduring power of love. And in this new chapter, Eleanor Whitfield was no longer defined by her silence but by her voice, her courage, and the unshakable bonds forged through empathy and trust. Her song was not just an expression of sound, it was a celebration of resilience, connection, and the beauty that can emerge when one allows love to lead.